Welcome to the deep dive. I am so glad you're here with us today because we are going to talk about something that I guarantee you have
Oh,
experienced.
absolutely.
You know, that highly relatable, incredibly frustrating feeling of really wanting to learn a new skill, like something big, something that could actually be life-changing.
Right.
But the second you sit down to actually do it, you just feel completely overwhelmed by everything you supposedly need to succeed.
Yeah, the prerequisites.
Exactly. You start thinking, I need massive amounts of free time. Or I need a ton of money for formal classes. I need the perfect distraction-free environment. And before you even take the first step, you've talked yourself right out of it.
You psych yourself out.
We all have that metaphorical graveyard of good intentions in our closets, right? The pristine running shoes, the acoustic guitar just gathering dust.
It's a universal experience. I mean, it is so incredibly common to look at a mountain of a goal and decide that you cannot possibly start climbing until you have the absolute highest grade professional climbing gear. You convince yourself that starting small is just a waste of time. And that paralysis, that overwhelming need for the perfect setup, is exactly what we're going to dismantle today.
Because today we're pulling from a really fascinating piece titled The Power of Small Daily Habits in English Mastery, which originally featured on the Easy English podcast.
Fantastic source.
Yeah, it's great. And our mission for this deep dive is to completely deconstruct the myth that you need perfect conditions to master a complex skill like a new language. And more importantly, we're going to extract the exact step-by-step blueprint for rapid solitary improvement.
And look, I want to validate any frustration you, the listener, might be feeling right now with traditional learning methods. Formal classrooms, rigid schedules, expensive tutors, they absolutely work for some people.
Sure.
But for others, they're massive roadblocks. The goal today is to look closely at how small, seemingly insignificant actions can actually reprogram the brain. We're going to use a highly specific case study from today's material that perfectly illustrates this entire process.
Let's introduce the star of our story today. Meet Daniel. Okay.
Now, Daniel's ultimate goal is something millions of people dream of. He wants to speak fluent English. And he's doing what a lot of us do when we kind of sort of want to learn something.
The casual stuff.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
He's engaging with the casual stuff. He watches movies in English. He listens to the music. He'll occasionally read an article online. But whenever he actually thinks about seriously studying the language, he hits this massive mental wall.
And those roadblocks are built from very specific limiting beliefs. Daniel tells himself learning English alone is just too difficult.
Yeah.
He fully believes that without a teacher sitting right next to him to physically correct every single mistake he makes, he is doomed to fail.
Right. He thinks he needs to drop a ton of money on expensive, intensive courses.
Yeah.
And because these limiting beliefs are just running on a loop in his head, Daniel just keeps delaying. He tells himself, I'll start when I find a good class.
Right.
But wait, why do we do this to ourselves?
Yeah.
Why do we set the barrier to entry so impossibly high? This raises an important question. And if we look at the psychology of Daniel's delay, I'll start when I find a good class mentality is actually a brilliant self-defense mechanism.
Self-defense mechanism. How so?
It protects us from the immediate discomfort of being bad at something new. Think about it. By convincing himself that he needs a teacher, an expensive course, and a structured classroom, Daniel has created an impossible set of prerequisites.
Oh, I see.
If he doesn't have the money or the time for the perfect class, well, then he can't start. And if he can't start, he never has to face the embarrassment of mispronouncing words or failing a grammar test.
It protects his ego.
Exactly. But when you wait for those perfect conditions to magically align, you're just delaying for a few days. Those weeks turn into months, and those months turn into years.
Man, that hits close to home. It's exactly like deciding you want to get into running, but refusing to jog a single block until you've purchased a $300 pair of shoes, a high-tech smartwatch, and hired a personal trainer. You're using the lack of perfect conditions as an excuse to avoid the messy, uncomfortable beginning.
Precisely. And in Daniel's case, the years are slipping by, and he is no closer to speaking fluent English because he is trapped in the waiting room of his own expectations.
But then we hit the turning point. One evening, Daniel is just browsing the internet, and he clicks on a video about language learning. And the speaker in this video says a single sentence that completely stops Daniel in his tracks.
The light bulb moment.
Exactly. The quote is, "You don't need perfect conditions to learn a language. You need daily habits."
That is the catalyst right there. That is the moment the glass shatters for him.
Okay, let's unpack this, because Daniel actually listens to that advice. The very next day, instead of waiting for this mythical, perfect, expensive course to fall into his lap, he completely pivots.
He takes action.
Yeah, he creates a simple English routine. And when we say simple, we mean micro habits. No complicated textbooks, no 3-hour study sessions, just small actions. Let's look at habit number 1.
The morning routine.
Right. Every single morning, while Daniel is just making his breakfast, cracking eggs, making coffee, doing his normal routine, he listens to an English podcast. But here is the thing. At first, Daniel only understands a few words.
Right. He's not getting the full picture.
He is not comprehending the whole show at all. So does passive listening actually work if he doesn't know what the words mean yet? Or is it more about just getting used to the noise?
Oh, it is so much more than just noise. From a neurological standpoint, what he's doing is a profound shift. By putting the podcast on in the background while he makes breakfast, he is immersing his brain in the cadence, the intonation, and the specific rhythm of English.
Like getting an ear for the music of the language.
Exactly. When you first hear a foreign language, your brain processes it as one long, unbroken stream of sound. You literally can't tell where one word ends and another begins.
It just sounds like a blur.
Right, a complete blur. But by listening every single morning, even without knowing the vocabulary, he is training his brain's auditory processing center to find the breaks, to recognize the repeating sounds, the phonemes. He is moving away from active, stressful textbook studying and moving toward passive, consistent exposure. His brain is doing the heavy lifting in the background while he scrambles his eggs.
That is wild. He's basically laying the auditory foundation before he even builds the house.
Exactly.
And then we have habit number 2, which happens at the other end of the day. In the evening, right before he goes to sleep, Daniel reads a short story in English. Sometimes he reads very slowly. Sometimes he even repeats sentences out loud to himself in his room.
Just getting the words in his mouth.
Yeah, and he starts this habit using a specific book called Short Stories in English for Beginners from Teach Yourself. Now, I remember taking language classes in high school, and it was all about staring at lists of vocabulary words. Why do stories work so much better?
Because of contextual learning. When you encounter a new word in a textbook list, it has absolutely no context. It is just arbitrary data to memorize.
And brains don't like that.
Your brain hates arbitrary data. But when you encounter a new word in a story, it is surrounded by context clues. Let's say you're reading a story and a character is trapped in a burning building and they run to the window and scream a word you don't know.
You're going to guess that word means help or fire.
Right. Your brain has to actively work to figure out its meaning based on the narrative situation. You're emotionally invested. You want to know what happens next. And that active problem solving tied to an emotional narrative is what cements the word into your long-term memory naturally.
It bypasses the rote memorization.
Totally. It doesn't feel like a chore. The focus shifts entirely from I am studying a language to I am experiencing a story.
It is so much more effective than staring at a stack of flashcards until your eyes cross. You're actually engaged. So Daniel is doing his morning listening and his evening reading. He does this consistently for a few weeks. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because Daniel adds a new habit to the mix. He begins using a technique called shadowing.
Shadowing is incredibly powerful, but we have to be honest here. It is not easy in the beginning.
Not at all. Shadowing means you are listening to someone speak English, and you attempt to repeat what you hear immediately, almost simultaneously. It's like you are casting an audio shadow over their voice.
Hence the name.
Right. And Daniel's experience with this is rough at first. It feels incredibly strange to him. He makes a ton of mistakes. He literally cannot keep up with the speaker. He's stumbling over his words, probably feeling pretty ridiculous standing alone in his room talking over a podcast.
And if you've ever tried to repeat a fast phrase in a new language and felt your tongue literally tie itself in a knot, you know exactly how silly Daniel felt right here. That awkwardness is the exact moment where most people quit. But Daniel pushes through it. You have to think about learning a new language, like learning a musical instrument, like the guitar.
Oh, I like that. How so?
The first time you try to press your fingers into a guitar chord, your hand cramps. It feels entirely unnatural. You physically cannot move your fingers fast enough to keep up with the song, and the sound you make is terrible.
Mostly just buzzing strings.
Exactly. But you keep doing it day after day. Eventually, muscle memory takes over, and your fingers just know where to go without you thinking about it. The exact same principle applies to the physical muscles in your mouth, your jaw, and your tongue.
Because your mouth is used to moving a very specific way for your native language, right?
Exactly. You are physically training your vocal tract to make completely new shapes and sounds. It requires physical repetition. By pushing through that awkward stumbling phase, Daniel is building muscle memory. Soon, his pronunciation becomes clearer and his confidence begins to grow because his mouth simply knows how to make the sounds now.
And speaking of pushing through the hard stuff, Daniel also tackles the ultimate villain of language learning, grammar.
Ah, grammar, the graveyard of language learners.
The endless tables of verb conjugations. But Daniel doesn't go back to the textbooks. He finds a second specific resource, a book called Learn English Through Stories. 16 stories to improve your English grammar and English vocabulary.
What's fascinating here is how Daniel discovers that learning grammar naturally, by seeing how English works in real sentences, is infinitely more effective than memorizing rigid rules.
Which is such a relief to hear, honestly.
It really is. It's the difference between reading a highly technical manual on how a combustion engine works versus actually getting behind the wheel and driving a car. Memorizing grammar rules is like reading the manual. You might pass a written test on what a clutch does, but you won't actually know how to navigate rush hour traffic.
Right. You might know the mathematical formula for torque, but you're still going to stall the car in the middle of an intersection your first time out.
Precisely. By reading stories, Daniel is driving the car. He is absorbing the grammar by witnessing it in action. He learns how sentences are constructed not because a teacher told him a rule about past participles, but because he has seen the pattern repeated naturally hundreds of times in the narratives he enjoys. His brain just starts to recognize what sounds right.
And learning through these stories actually becomes one of the most enjoyable parts of his entire routine. Imagine that, enjoying learning grammar. But all of these small habits, the morning podcasts, the evening stories, the shadowing, they lead to a massive internal transformation for Daniel. He completely stops thinking, I can't learn English alone, and his mindset shifts to every day as an opportunity to improve.
That is the crucial turning point. That's when the language ceases to be a subject he is studying, and it becomes a lens through which he actively views his world.
He starts living the language. Even though he's alone, he starts integrating English into his daily life in these highly specific ways. While he's just walking down the street, he starts actively trying to think his thoughts in English.
That's huge.
Yeah. When he's in his kitchen cooking dinner, he speaks out loud to himself in English. He looks at objects around his apartment and describes them. At first, the sentences are super simple. The apple is red. I am walking to the store. But every single day, they become just a little bit more complex.
He has essentially turned his own home and his own internal monologue into an immersion classroom. He didn't have to buy a plane ticket travel to a foreign country or pay a dime to a tutor to get that immersion experience. He created it internally.
And then the universe decides it is time for the ultimate test. One day, Daniel is at work, and a new colleague joins the company. And this new colleague happens to speak English. Daniel realizes this is it. This is the moment. He feels nervous, which is completely understandable. But he also feels curious. So he takes a breath, walks over, and starts a small conversation with this new colleague.
The true test of everything he's been doing alone in his kitchen and his bedroom. The stakes are suddenly very real.
They are. And at first he speaks slowly. He's carefully choosing his words. But the conversation continues. It doesn't stall out. And suddenly Daniel has this amazing realization right in the middle of talking. He is communicating in English with another human being. It's working. And there's a very deliberate point we need to make here regarding the result of this test. Daniel wasn't speaking perfectly. He made mistakes.
That is the most important part of this entire story.
He wasn't speaking perfectly, but I was speaking clearly. And he was speaking confidently. The colleague understood him, and he understood the colleague. That evening, Daniel smiles to himself because he finally understands the secret. Progress doesn't come from locking yourself in a room and intensely studying grammar tables for 5 hours once a month. Progress comes from small daily habits.
Consistency over perfection. He traded the illusion of the perfect classroom for the messy reality of daily practice.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? We can distill Daniel's entire journey into a core formula that you can literally start using today. Here is the exact blueprint. 10 minutes of listening, 10 minutes of reading, a few minutes of speaking, day after day, step by step.
It's so beautifully achievable. It strips away all the intimidation. You don't need a 3-hour block of free time on a Saturday. You just need 25 minutes spread throughout your normal daily activities. 10 minutes where you make coffee, 10 minutes before you fall asleep.
And to help you get to that level of clear, confident communication that Daniel achieved there is a third and final specific resource we need to talk about. It's a book called Effortless English, Learn to Speak English Like a Native. How does a resource like this fit into the blueprint?
This book perfectly aligns with Daniel's endgame. When you first start learning a language, you have a middleman in your brain. You see an apple, your brain thinks the word apple in your native language, and then you translate it to the new language. Effortless English focuses heavily on breaking that translation habit. It trains you to skip the middleman and actually think in the language directly.
So you're not doing mental gymnastics before every sentence you speak.
Exactly. It's about building confidence and speaking naturally. It is the perfect capstone to the daily habits we've discussed, moving you from someone who is translating words to someone who is simply speaking their mind.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to deliver a final, incredibly comforting message directly to you. Because if you are sitting there right now trying to learn English, or honestly trying to master any complex skill entirely on your own, you need to hear this. You do not need a classroom. You do not need perfect grammar. You don't even need a daily teacher looking over your shoulder criticizing your every move. You are not behind. You are not too late. And you are not learning too slowly. Every single word you figure out, every awkward sentence you practice in your kitchen, and every story you listen to is moving you forward. You just have to keep going.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really forces you to take a hard look at how we approach our ambitions in life. We've just spent this time looking at how adopting incredibly small, imperfect 10-minute daily habits, something as simple as talking to yourself out loud while chopping vegetables or putting on a podcast while making your morning eggs, can literally rewire the neural pathways in your brain to master a whole new language without any formal instruction. It really makes you wonder, what other massive, seemingly impossible goals in your life are you needlessly delaying right now simply because you were sitting around waiting for the perfect conditions to start?
Wow, that is exactly what we need to take away from this. The perfect conditions are a myth. Don't wait for the perfect moment, the perfect gear, or the perfect class. Just take that first, messy, awkward 10-minute step today. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Keep practicing, keep learning, and we'll be right here waiting for you next time.